Hey, my name is Akash Rudra, and today we're going to talk about antibiotic resistance. In order to first grasp the concept of antibiotic resistance, you first need to know what the difference is between a bacteria and a virus. The image on the left is an image of a bacteria. The image on the right is the image of a virus. There are two ways to get rid of bacteria inside of your body, naturally and by antibiotics. The way it's done naturally is your body has T cells stored inside. Each one of these T cells is designed to kill a certain type of bacteria. While you are sick, your body knows what bacteria it is, but needs to sift the billions of T cells that are stored. As soon as it finds the right the T cell is multiplied and distributed throughout your bloodstream, and the bacteria is killed. The second way is through antibiotics. Antibiotics is a medicine that's designed to counteract or kill bacteria throughout your body. An antibiotic is taken, distributed into the bloodstream, and spread throughout the body, but more concentrated where the bacteria is, and kills off the bacteria. These are the two ways to kill a bacteria. Killing a virus is a little bit different. The only way to get rid of a virus is through T cells. There are a lot more types of viruses than there are types of bacteria. So it'll take longer to find the right T cell to kill that specific virus. A cold is a type of virus. Often, a cold takes 7 to 8 days to get rid of. That is because in the 7 to 8 days, your body is finding T cells and fighting off the infection. Your body is actually quite interesting. What is antibiotic resistance? Well, as the name would say, it's the resistance to an antibiotic. What that really means is that when you are given an antibiotic to take, it does not work. The bacteria is resistant to the antibiotic. This happens when bacteria change in a certain way that reduces or eliminates the effectiveness of drugs, chemicals, or other agents designed to cure or prevent infections. This happens when the antibiotic doesn't really work anymore. The bacteria survive and continue to multiply, causing more harm than what you would expect. Bacteria can do this through several ways. Some bacteria develop the ability to neutralize the antibiotic before it can do harm. Others rapidly pump the antibiotic out, and still others can change the antibiotic attack site to attack somewhere where the bacteria is not. Let's talk about antibiotics in the present. Antibiotics are among the most commonly prescribed drugs used in human medicine and can be often life-saving. However, up to 50% of the time, antibiotics are not optimally prescribed, often done so when not needed, with incorrect dosing, or for the wrong duration. One giant factor in the growth of antibiotic resistance is the spread of resistant strains of bacteria from person to person or from non-human sources in the environment. One important thing to know is that all bacteria have the ability to develop resistance to the drugs developed for their demise. Basically, antibiotic resistance happens naturally, but what's happening now is that it's happening at a much faster rate than nature intended. What you see on the screen is a zoomed up picture of E. coli. E. coli is bacteria, but is currently not resistant to any antibiotic. But at the rate we're using it right now, it is projected that within 10 years, E. coli will be resistant to most antibiotics. Let's talk about how antibiotic resistance happens. There are 4 main steps. First, the person gets infected with lots of bacteria in the area of infection. Next, the person takes antibiotics, which kill up to 99.7% of the bacteria. But remember, there's always going to be this 0.3%. That 0.3% of bacteria, which is now drug resistant, is allowed to grow and take over the area of infection. That 0.3% of bacteria multiplies and reproduces so much that it can go back to the original amount of bacteria. But now that original amount of bacteria is drug resistant to that drug, and now another type of antibiotic must be used against it. But it may not be as effective or may not work at all. Let's now talk about the history of antibiotic resistance. The first antibiotic was penicillin. It was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928 and was put into practice in around 1945. But in 1940, 5 years before it was implemented throughout the United States, Alexander Fleming found that certain strains of bacteria were resistant to penicillin, but he released the drug anyway. Once the antibiotic was used widely throughout the United States, resistant strains capable of inactivating the drug became prevalent, and synthetic studies were undertaken to modify penicillin chemically. What this means is that they took certain parts of penicillin and changed it so that it still had the ability to kill bacteria, but it perhaps didn't work as effectively or as well. But once they put it back in the service, the same thing happened with certain strains of bacteria becoming resistant to it again. Let's now talk about how antibiotic resistance spreads. One of the most common ways that antibiotic resistance spreads is, first step, antibiotics are put in animal feed to keep animals from developing costly yet preventable diseases. The animal meat is then served to humans, and the humans get the bacteria that the pigs or cows once had. The humans then spread that infection in the general public to other people. This comes from skin to skin or feet from cough. The human can also spread that resistant bacteria to his or her caretaker. Caretaker meaning nurse or doctor in the hospital, because this bacteria is not hurting their body. The caretaker can spread one patient's infection to another patient, but this bacteria is still resistant. So when that one patient spreads to the second, they're both now contain drug-resistant bacteria. The second way of spread is from infected water or crops being consumed by humans, and therefore the bacteria transfers straight to them. That same situation can apply to animals. The infected water or crops is eaten by the chickens or the cows or the pigs, and therefore we eat that and get the bacteria transferred straight into us. What does mitosis have to do with antibiotic resistance? Well, in case you didn't know, mitosis is the splitting and reproducing of cells within the human body. Mitosis is a naturally messy process. It contains lots of errors. These errors include skin color, hair color, eye color. In case you didn't know, blue eyes is a mutation. Red hair is a mutation. Most humans had brown or black hair at the beginning of the human race. But as things produce sexually or even asexually, things within DNA called nucleotides are substituted or accidentally put there when they're not supposed to go there. Mutations can cause no harm, be fixed by the body, can help the host, or even harm the host. In the case of bacteria, the mutation helps it live because it's helping surviving against the antibiotic, which normally would kill it. What are we as humans and citizens doing wrong to cause this spike in antibiotic resistance? Well, see, this problem is mostly a doctor problem or a citizen problem. Doctors often prescribe drugs at the wrong time of infection, be it too early or too late. Some prescribe completely the wrong drug. Some prescribe the wrong dosage. This usually happens when they prescribe too little of the drug and the bacteria is not fully killed, but only half of it is killed, but the other half is still left there. It can also be put for the wrong duration. This means that the doctor tells the patient to only take the drug for a few days, but those few days are too little to completely kill the bacteria, so the bacteria still lives on. Some doctors prescribe drugs when they're not necessary. This could be when a patient is showing symptoms of streptococcus when it's actually just common cold. Doctor will prescribe you antibiotics for strep throat, but actually you have a cold. All this is doing is make the actual strep bacteria, which are naturally in your body, stronger. Sometimes when you think of bacteria, you think of washing your hands with soap, and you think that'll clear it off. Usually there are two types of hand soaps. Hand soaps with antibiotics in them, or hand soaps without. Studies have shown that soaps with antibiotics in them are no safer than soaps that do not have the antibiotics. All those antibiotics doing are making those bacteria on your hands stronger. One way we as citizens can help the spread of antibiotic resistance is just to be educated. We as citizens can just learn about the problem and perhaps teach to other citizens. When people are educated, they know when and why this is wrong, and therefore can prevent it from happening in the future. Let's talk about MRSA. MRSA is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Basically what that is a standard stripe of staph infection that has become resistant to most antibiotics over the several centuries that it's been with us. It is very widespread and is one of the most common bacteria that is resistant to antibiotics. MRSA can easily be stopped by healthcare professionals, but is rather spread by them when their misuse of hygiene causes it to spread from patient to patient. It's spread by skin to skin. So if one patient has MRSA, touches the doctor, doctor now has MRSA. If that doctor does not wash his hands carefully and thoroughly, touches another patient, that patient now has MRSA as well. You can now see that MRSA is very contagious and is very widespread. MRSA is actually just non-harmful bacteria that lives in your nose. 33.3% of people have this bacteria in their noses. But once you get a cut and it enters your bloodstream, it wreaks havoc on the immune system, completely hurting your skin and immune system. Let's talk about a real-life example of antibiotic resistance hurting a community. There's a small village in China near the Himalayas where a factory manufactures streptomycin, the antibiotic for tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a disease that causes blood to fill up in your lungs. It's usually fatal. This factory uses the water from the river to clean out its facilities. The factory then dumps the water back into the river. Since the villagers are in a relatively rural area, the villagers must drink that water. But that water still has the antibiotics in it. So, for every human that's drinking that water, they're consuming part of the antibiotic. This has been happening for almost 10 years, and now 14% of every single living organism is now resistant to streptomycin. If we took that scale and applied it to the United States, if that factory was in the United States and hurt all the water, that would be around 44 million people. That's all from water supply being infected from antibiotics. Antibiotics is a real problem that's around the world. The problem is that it's very small scale right now. Therefore, us as Americans do not see the problem being talked about every day. But it's a big upcoming problem that needs to be taken care of now. So what? Who cares about antibiotic resistance? Well, it may be a small problem right now, but in the future, it's going to be one of the biggest. As of September 2013, the CDC has continued to cite the Alliance for Prudent Use of Antibiotic, or the APUA, assessment stating that antibiotic resistance adds $20 billion in excess direct healthcare costs, that's just hospitals, with additional costs to society for lost productivity as high as $35 billion per year. That's already $55 billion per year in the United States as of 2013. And at the extremely high rate that it's increasing, it's going to keep going and going. In 2016, it's projected to cost $75 billion. And with the rapidly growing population in the United States, the cost will be around $100 billion by 2019. But since this is a small problem, not many Americans or people around the world know about this and are working toward it. The APUA is one of the only organizations working to stop or at least to alleviate antibiotic resistance all over the world. Here are all the sources that I got my information, statistics, and stories from throughout my presentation. Special thanks to the CDC, WHO, APUA, and Tufts University for me using their information. And that's it for my presentation about antibiotic resistance. Thank you for learning, and make sure to spread this information to others so we can stop this epidemic from becoming too big.